Hello and welcome to Civil Society Speaks, the podcast by social platform dedicated to amplifying the voices of civil society organizations from all over Europe. My name is Andrea Abril, and today we have the pleasure to have in the podcast Sabine Saliba, Secretary General of Eurochild, which with 211 members from 42 different countries, is the largest network of child rights organizations and individuals working with and for children. Welcome, Sabine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. We're very happy to have this opportunity.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Let's dive right in. What do you see as the main threats facing children in Europe today?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, before the European parliamentary elections this year, we conducted a survey with a group of children, Children's Advisory Board. So we developed a survey with them and with other child rights organizations. And the idea was to launch the survey and listen to children's opinions on what they think are the main issues they face today. From the survey we got, it was more than 9,000 answers. Their biggest concerns were war and conflict, mental health, finding jobs or study opportunities, education, harassment and bullying, and climate change, among others. But you probably noticed that this aligns very closely with broader societal concerns. And that is because if we take just a small step back, all human rights are children's rights. And children are affected by the same global issues that adults face, but they have additional difficulties that they face due to their specific vulnerabilities. So the rise of the far right lately and their conservative agendas create additional challenges for children to achieve all their rights. So, for example, in terms of poverty and social exclusion, many children in Europe live in low income families, and this impacts their access to basic needs like education, healthcare, and nutritious food. And unfortunately, 1 in 4 children in Europe are growing up in poverty. In Bulgaria, Spain, and Romania, this rises to 1 in 3 children. And this really is unacceptable. And conservative agendas that advocate for fewer social rights will not elevate this issue. Another example is the migration and refugee crisis. So, displaced children face severe challenges regarding security, social inclusion, and access to services. And increasing incidents of hate speech and conservative policies make this even more difficult. But there are other issues that children face, like they mentioned in the survey. So, mental health is very important. There are increasing rates of anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues among children and adolescents. Child abuse and neglect also is a persistent issue. So, there are persistent issues of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse that remain significant concerns for children. A last point I'd like to make is digital risks. So, exposure to inappropriate content, cyberbullying, and online predators are major issues facing children today as well.
Incredible, thank you. How do civil society organizations like your child have to address all of these alarming threats?
The first important thing for us and for many other organizations who work with children is to listen to children. So child participation is key. Whenever we're working for children, we should work with them. So we try to include children as much as we can in our work. And we also work in many ways and focus on several key areas to address threats facing children. And we do it a lot with our members since we have quite a big membership that spreads across 42 countries, like you said. So we work, for example, on advocacy. We advocate for better policies that protect children and promote all children's rights. And this is a crucial role for us because influencing policy can create widespread and lasting change. Another tool we use is research and data collection. So, through some of our research and that of our extensive membership, we have access to a wealth of research and data. So gathering and disseminating this data is vital for informing policy and practice, and obviously our advocacy work. We also work on raising on awareness raising campaigns. So raising public awareness about the issues facing children is essential. So we want to inform the public and policymakers about these challenges. Last thing is last example of the tools we use is capacity building. So we try to provide training and resources to professionals who work with children, because we are not on the front lines ourselves, but this ensures that those who are on the front lines are well equipped to support and protect children more effectively.
Amazing. You mentioned that including children voices in decision-making process is key. How do you do it from your child to include these children voices?
Yeah. Well, child participation for us is included in our overall strategy and in many of our projects. So we use different methods to ensure that children directly are involved directly and that their voices are heard and valued. So, for example, we use surveys. We conduct surveys like the one I mentioned at the beginning, what we called it the Europe Kids Want, and it was to listen to children, to how children feel about the current issues. We conduct these surveys to gather children's opinions on various issues affecting their lives. And this allows us to understand their perspective and then incorporate them into our work. Uh, we also directly involve children through different platforms like our Eurochild Children's Council, the ECC. So the ECC is a selected group of children supported by Eurochild members from different countries in Europe. And they play an advisory role in relation to Eurochild's key policy and advocacy priorities, our governance decisions, and events. The ECC has a mandate of 2 years, and a new council just started its mandate 2 weeks ago. And additionally, we also pilot what we call national Eurochild forums in a few countries to further engage at national level more children. And the National Eurochild Forums are a group of children from diverse backgrounds who are responsible for collecting and investigating the views of children across their own country. We also work on workshops for adults and decision makers. So we run several workshops for members of the European Commission, Frontex, and other bodies to prepare adults and decision makers to listen actively to children. So these trainings are crucial because they create an environment where children feel that their voices are respected and considered. We also have local participation mechanisms. So in some projects we implement with our members, like ones we have in Naples and Budapest, we created mechanisms for participation at the local level. So this involved several children and young people who previously couldn't share their needs and ideas with local authorities. So we established these channels, and by doing so, we ensure that local governments consider the perspectives of their younger constituents.
Very interesting. Would you say, well, right now we have some child protection systems in Europe. Do you think that those protection systems are adequate, or is there still much to be done?
Hmm. Well, it's interesting you ask that because we just recently launched a project called Shaping Tomorrow's Child Protection Services with Children in collaboration with Terre des Hommes. And the project aims to address violence against children, but involving them directly in 8 European countries by funding intervention that can improve their lives. But in general, we believe that the current child protection systems in Europe need significant improvements. Can mention a few key issues like first, inconsistent implementation. So there is variability in how child protection policies are applied across different countries. And this inconsistency leads to unequal protection for children depending on where they live. And there are also limited resource limitations. So there's a need for more funding and staffing for child protection services. And more adequate resources are crucial for effective child protection. There's also the issue of legal and procedural gaps. So some countries have inadequate legal frameworks and procedural safeguards, which hinders effective child protection. There's also the issue that we all know, it's the some barriers to access services. So some vulnerable groups, including migrants and minorities, face significant barriers in accessing child protection services in many countries. Um, if I'd like to focus just quickly on children in alternative care, because ensuring that children in alternative care are considered and prioritized in integrated child protection systems is essential. We launched last year an initiative called Data Care with UNICEF, and it aims to ensure that these children are included in the European Child Guarantee, trying to pave the way for better data-informed decisions, funding, and reform efforts in Europe and beyond. So overall, there have been advancements. We can deny that, but there is still much to be done because it needs to be consistent, well-resourced, and accessible to all children.
Thank you. Also, you've been responding from Eurochild to various recent emergencies, like, for example, the invasion of Ukraine, Gaza, and different natural disasters. How do these situations affect directly children? And what kind of support do organizations fighting for children's rights provide?
Yeah. Uh, well, Your Child is primarily a platform for exchanging ideas and knowledge and information. So we want to always provide our members with a place to showcase their needs, their work, and statements. So it's a space where they can exchange ideas and information and their responses during emergencies. And we try to advocate, and we want to always advocate for the rights and protection of children in crisis situations. And we work with governments, I mean, through our members and with international bodies to ensure that policies are in place to protect children's rights and well-being. So, and regarding our support on the war on Ukraine, especially at the beginning, we worked a lot on fundraising and information sharing. So we helped our members who were fundraising and created an online hub to collect information for Ukrainians who were leaving their countries, and also for NGOs working to help children in and from Ukraine. And we also held regular meetings and collaboration. So we had regular meetings with our Ukrainian members and those on the borders, which is 1 in 5 of your child's total membership. So we collaborated with the Ukrainian government and UNICEF to examine laws and policies at national level for children in alternative care and for unaccompanied and separated children arriving in different countries in Europe. We also did something here in Belgium. We printed and distributed a coloring book for children who escaped the war to try to help them cope with the trauma. On our response to the war in Palestine, we feel that organizations like us must play an important role in ensuring European decision makers take the right positions to secure peace and call for a ceasefire. It is crucial to us to take a strong stance, the strongest stance for children, and ensuring that civilian lives are spared and human rights, especially children's rights, are respected for everyone, regardless of origin and ethnicity. And on that, combating discrimination is key. So we must work to ensure that all communities living in Europe feel safe and to reduce hate speech and discrimination. So we should always foster a safer environment for all children.
All of these initiatives are amazing. Are you working right now in any future on any upcoming initiatives that you are planning? Do you have some projects in mind?
So your child is engaged in several projects and initiatives because we work very closely with our members on specific things, and it's always with the aim to protect and promote children's rights across Europe. I can just mention a few topics and projects. As I mentioned before, with the rise of the far right, we've been gathering a lot of evidence from our members on incidents of what we call anti-rights movements. So all these movements that go against fundamental human rights and challenge their existence. And they're affecting children a lot. And we've been gathering this evidence from our members. And we'd like to do more work on this to ensure that children's rights are upheld and defended against repressive and regressive policies and attitudes. So we want to develop in the near future a proper strategy for this particular part of our work, especially with the current rise of conservative agendas across Europe. Our work on the European Child Guarantee will continue. So we will continue to push to work on a proper implementation of the national action plans. So just a small reminder, the European Child Guarantee is a mechanism that aims to ensure that children in need have access to essential services like healthcare, education, and housing. So it focuses on providing comprehensive support to vulnerable children to improve their quality of life. Uh, and as I mentioned, our Eurochild Children's Council is a very important platform for us. So we will continue to engage children in discussions and decisions affecting their lives through the ECC. So this platform empowers children to voice their opinions and participate in shaping policies that impact them. We have ongoing work on child poverty. So we have various initiatives aimed at reducing child poverty and social exclusion. And by addressing the root causes of poverty, we want to work to create better opportunities and outcomes for children in need. We also continue to work on our advocacy for children's rights. So these efforts aim to influence European policy and national governments to always prioritize children's rights. We work to ensure that children's rights are at the forefront of legislative and policy decisions. But more specific project, I'll just mention a couple. We just launched a new project that we call the Guide Project, and it's to support professionals and guardians responsible for unaccompanied and separated children arriving in the EU. We also just launched a 3-year sub-granting and capacity building program that I mentioned very quickly earlier to support grassroots civil society organizations in addressing violence against children. It will be active in 9 countries: Bulgaria, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Portugal, Romania, Serbia, Spain, and Ukraine. And it will subgrant organizations to strengthen local initiatives against child violence. But we always want to mainstream children's voices in decision making. I think I've made the point quite a few times, but for us, it's very important, and we work to include children's voices in decision making at various levels. Locally, like the projects I mentioned earlier, we have projects in Naples and Budapest that engage children in municipal governance. But we also have a project in Ireland called Building Children's Futures, that incorporates child rights impact assessments into policymaking.
Thank you very much. It's exciting. Um, Finally, what would be your main ask for this new mandate?
Um, I think all children's rights should be a priority, and we'd like the new mandate to not just look at children as the adults of tomorrow or the workforce of tomorrow, but as human beings today who must enjoy their full set of human rights. But more specifically, we'd like to call for first strengthening child protection systems, like I explained before. They should ensure consistent and effective implementation of child protection policies across all EU member states. We want to call for increased funding for child rights programs, so secure more resources for initiatives that target all children's rights. Um, there should be greater involvement of children in policymaking. So we think that they should institutionalize mechanisms for children's participation in decision making at all levels. I think it's time for a greater focus on mental health. It started already, and we hope that the new mandate will continue to prioritize mental health services and support for children. But on the last point, addressing child poverty and social exclusion should be key also for the mandate. So, addressing poverty and inequality was a key driver for voters' choices with the EU elections. So, political leaders in the EU need to address poverty in this mandate, including investing in children, their families, and their communities.
Thank you very much, Sabine, for joining us today and for sharing your insights on the challenge facing children in Europe and the crucial role of civil society in addressing these issues. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you. It was my pleasure, really. It's always nice to discuss this and to share all this information, especially now with the new mandate, is very critical. So, thank you.
Thank you. And this has been Civil Society Speaks, the podcast dedicated to amplifying voices of civil society organizations from all over Europe. Thank you for listening and see you in the next episode.